our idea is we take a movie, we grind it up and see what it's made of. But I'm trying to find something from a filmmaker perspective that's going to educate you on what they're doing with the story, whether it's themes or the way they're composing their image, to help connect with you to the story in a more fluid way so that you're much more immersed now.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 102 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. I am coming to you live from sunny Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, and I hope you guys are having an amazing week. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, number one, thank you so much for checking it out. It really means the world to me. You got millions of options out there, and you chose for my voice to be traveling through your eardrums. Pretty cool stuff. But if you don't know already, the show is about having meaningful in-person conversations with the most fascinating people that I know. I love talking to people who are chasing their dreams, whether it's entrepreneurs, world travelers, athletes, doctors, influencers, you name it. I've done it over 100 times now. We sit down together in person always. A lot of podcasts are done over Skype and phone call and all that. We're always in person, and they share their story with me, and that is pretty awesome. So before I jump into the show, wanted to mention that this episode has been brought to you by the Andrew Deitch Podcast Internship Program. The podcast is really growing, and we are hiring some interns. And mainly, you won't be treated as just a simple coffee runner or just some busy worker. We're looking for someone with an entrepreneurial spirit, a passion for learning, an open mind, and a solid understanding of podcasts and social media culture. So if you or anyone you know is looking for opportunities in live video production, videography, audio editing, graphic design, animation, photography, social media strategy, public relations, podcast scheduling, prep, research, script writing, or copywriting, that's a lot of stuff, then please visit andrewdeitch.com/internships for more details and to apply. And I did want to mention that we've been getting some amazing applications, and I can't wait to work with some of you amazing people. All right, so today my guest is Wes Evans. And Wes is a filmmaker who lives in Austin, Texas, and his company is called Icarus Burning Productions. And they've made all kinds of video content, including short films, music videos, educational stuff, videos for small businesses, and many other passion projects, and they've been around since 2012. He's also one of the hosts of the amazing film podcast called The Pestle, and The Pestle is a podcast dedicated to in-depth movie talk, because a good movie is often about more than what it's actually about. And for Wes, watching movies is not just a simple pastime, it's actually work. And since he's incessantly analyzing and learning anyways, by watching tons of movies, The Pestle was created. And the podcast is full of spoilers, so definitely watch the movies before you listen to the podcast. But they really analyze and break down some of the best films of all time, and it's fascinating to hear his perspectives on what makes or breaks some of these all-time great movies. And I was introduced to Wes through Katia Sarmiento from episode 58. Can't thank her enough. She's always introducing me to new and interesting guests all the time. I think she's probably holds the record for introducing me to the most guests. But without any further ado, please welcome the amazing and talented Wes Evans. And just like that, we are live. Wes Evans. Am I saying it correctly? Wes Evans?
Evans. Yeah.
Evans. Okay. I was like, did I get it wrong? Wes Evans. And on your Facebook, there's what is your Facebook name?
Oh man, you've been stalking me.
Well, no, Kat shared it with me. It was like Wes Evans and something else.
Yeah,
and I was like,
Heidenreich. My legal name, my government, as they say, is Heidenreich, and I go by Evans because as a stage name, that's just going to be a really, tough bite to chew on. So
yes,
my agent was not thrilled with Heidenreich, so I switched to Evans, which is my mother's maiden name.
Gotcha.
So now everyone knows one of my security questions.
Oh, my bad.
No,
I can chop that if you want me to.
I'm just playing.
That's awesome. That's funny. Yeah, because I was like, everything I saw says Evans, and then I saw Heidenreich, and I was like, number one, I don't know how to say it, but now I do.
Yeah.
And then number two, I was like, I was just curious. So very nice. Well, Wes has a podcast as well, which is really cool. I got to listen to an episode, or almost probably a full episode if I combine the two that I listened to. But so like I said, if people just meet you, or you meet someone in an elevator or something like that, and they say, well, hey, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
I mean, the super short version is I'm a filmmaker, which I often get referred to as a videographer by people who don't know better. And I'm like, no, I'm not a videographer. That's like a guy with a camera who shoots your, conference.
Yeah.
I translate it or analogize it to a chef is not a cook. A cook is someone who's working at like a Burger King, which is fine. But a chef is someone who's looking to create something and an actual experience. And so I'm a writer, director, sometimes actor, but I'm a filmmaker. Like I want to create something that is specific and hopefully visually pleasing. I think that's the shortest.
I like that analogy. I feel like also it could be attributed to like an author versus like a blogger or something like that. Like crafting a story versus just like writing something just so it's in a written form to be consumed.
Absolutely. And it's not that videography isn't with its own challenges and creative aspects. It certainly is. But I think there's just a different approach to each one of those, career paths.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So your podcast is the Pestle, right?
Correct, yeah.
Is it? I bet a lot of people say Pestle too.
Yeah.
Is that a hard thing? Is it a sensitive subject?
The only people who actually say that are whenever every week I try to do a custom intro with a new voiceover guy. And every single time they say the Pestle, I'm like, what is a pestle, bro? You do this for a living? Come on.
That's hilarious. So every single episode is a different voiceover guy?
Well, not necessarily a guy, but a new soundbite. So
okay,
I
so it always has like, because I heard on the Ex Machina one, it was like brought to you by the letter H or something like that. I thought that was funny because in the other one it didn't say that, and I was like, wait, what?
Because it's not, to me and my co-host anyway, it's not a comedy podcast. It's very heady, and so I feel like there's only a couple opportunities to work in like something funny and punchy, and so the intro is an opportunity to inject some wit, and along with I have a faux sponsor every week that kind of has a secret coded thing to
funny.
it. Yeah, so like okay, I can inject some humor there, but the rest of it's probably going to be very rare that we
like that.
Even though I laugh through the whole podcast, I'm just geeking out, and I wish I would not laugh, but I can't.
Yeah, but I think people probably enjoy that. It adds more of a human element to it. But I like the fake sponsor thing. I do a thing where at the end of every episode, I always get the funniest or weirdest line that I can find and put it at the very end. So people got to listen to the whole outro to hear it, but it's at the very end, like right during the music of the outro. A lot of people listening to this probably have never made it all the way to the end.
Oh, really?
So they might do it now. But yeah, I started doing it, I think, around like episode 20 or something like that.
So it'll be something you or I say throughout this?
Yeah, like if one of us said like
the peanut butter floor is tasting of smoke.
Yeah, or something like that. No, and a lot of times I look in the waveform to see when we laugh, like a really big spike. I'm like, oh, that's probably a laugh. And then I'll go back and see what we said. And it's like, oh, that's funny. I'm going to put that at the very end or whatever,
That's really clever.
That's my little tip.
Yeah, actually, I have an intern right now, which to me is hilarious. I'm not successful enough to have like interns and stuff. But that's one of the things I started her doing was editing my podcast because I like to tighten it down and make it as concise as possible, all the uhs and all the stutters, repetitive phrases. Like, let's just get it down to the nuts and bolts. And I started her with that. And this is going to your point about checking the wave spike because it's so intelligent. And I think even as a filmmaker, starting with audio and understanding what makes for good audio is such a foundational point of understanding what makes for a good video. Because sound is half of what you're paying attention to when you're watching a film.
And it's the one thing you can't turn off.
People will sit through bad audio or bad video. They won't sit through 30 seconds of bad audio.
Exactly.
Never, not in your life.
Yeah.
And so I've had her start with that, and I think that's going to help her when she starts getting into like documentary work and interviews. Just tighten it down, like make it so much easier. The interview subject's going to like you more for it, and the viewer is going to like you more for it.
Yeah.
Much cleaner.
I ruffled a few feathers actually in this podcast editing group one time because I basically I was trying to ruffle feathers on purpose. I wasn't just saying this like. Rarely do you have a statement that you can apply to 100% of situations, right? So, for example, if you have a podcast that is like a news podcast, or you're talking about a very tight subject or whatever, and you want to make it as bite-sized and consumable as possible. Like I totally get the fact that you really want to tighten it up, take out anything that's unnecessary, and you're left with that product that, is the exact thing. And then there's some podcasts like mine, it's a little more conversational, it's a little more loose, it's a little, so I sometimes like to keep some of that stuff in.
Yeah, the human element
exactly
adds to the personalities that you're hearing.
Exactly, and not to get too into the weeds about what a podcast is, but a podcast really is just an audio thing, it's just like, it's kind of like a radio show that's online. There's saying the word podcast is almost as broad as saying the word song. It's like, well, a song should be like this. Well, no, I think a song should be like this, or a song should be like that, or whatever. Same thing with podcasts. So I went into this group and I made this little short video basically saying like, I don't think you should ever edit a podcast. And it's all these dudes that edit podcasts for a living. And they all took a dump on me. It was hilarious. It was so good. It was exactly what I wanted though, because I just wanted to ruffle feathers and get my name kind of in there. But some people were like, hey, I kind of agree with this guy. Sometimes it's appropriate to, really tighten it down NPR style. And then there's some other times where, if it's especially a comedy podcast or something, it's like, there's no need for that. People are there for the goofiness.
I wrestle with that actually quite a bit, because some of the other podcasts I listen to, I get so frustrated with the personalities because there's so much uhs and ums as they're trying to capture the word, and then the payoff isn't good enough to sit through those uhs and ums. And I'm like, y'all should... I always want to send them a note saying, hey, you should edit your stuff. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, if this is a news organization, is that considering editing the news and the work? And I don't know.
Yeah, it is a weird thing, because there's a balance between respecting your audience and then also respecting the integrity of there's you can chop things way too much, and then
the intention is gone.
Exactly. No. You're messing up the intention. So anyways, but not to get too into the weeds about podcasting, because we can talk about that a little bit later, but let's go back. I really like, talking about people's stories and how you got to where you are today and everything. That's really kind of what the reason I started the podcast was. I find that really fascinating, because we tend to look at someone as kind of a stationary object. Like I look at you and I'm like, oh, this cool filmmaker guy, but chances are you probably...
not cool at all. You're right.
No. Chances are back in the day, you might have not been that same guy. You might have, been pursuing something else or whatever. So kind of, take us back. How did you kind of get started?
So this morning we were at brunch where I had way too many mimosas, and it was an interesting moment where I'm here in Atlanta visiting two friends who are artists. And one of them says, hey guys, can we just take a minute and appreciate that right now we're about to pay for brunch, a meal that was funded by art. Like, we're all artists. How cool is that? And he looked at me and said, did you ever imagine, at what point did you realize you could do art for a living? And I was like, man, just a few years ago. Growing up, I grew up in this tiny Texas town that had a population of less than 1,500. And so growing up, my only dream was to work in an office in the air conditioning. And I felt like everyone around me was either military or labor. And I just didn't think it was even remotely possible to be an artist. Like, I loved writing, I fell in love with music, and I just always had a passion to create stories. Even as a kid, I would ride the school bus, and week to week or day to day, I would be creating this grand epic story for my buddy who rode the bus with me. And I was just every day building onto the story. And that absolutely never occurred to me that this was an avenue that I could take. And only really until, 2011, 2012, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go all in on acting. And
Were you living in the same area? Or?
Yeah, in Austin. So 2 hours away from where I grew up in Austin is where I was living in 2011. And I just got tired of, the corporate life and working for the man. At that point, I kind of built up some other skill sets. I still was, a decent writer. And I taught myself video editing. I'm very autodidactic in that kind of way. Everything I know is pretty self-taught.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy words. Hopefully, as a writer, I'm not terrible at them altogether. But I became a video editor and understood, hey, here's what makes for a good edit in and of itself. From one slice to the next, here's what makes sense. And for me, it was cutting on action, which was a progression of story. And from there, I got a job editing videos for a website called Expert Village, which
I've seen some videos on there,
Really?
Yeah.
I built...
They're kind of like how-to videos, right?
Yep. I went from editing some of their content to creating and starting their YouTube channel, which became, whenever I was running it, the largest YouTube channel in the world. And so that was my corporate job. And along the way, I was doing acting and fell in love with acting, which was just, to me, a funny process because I started as a video editor, or I started as a writer. And I was like, this is where all the creative is, you're telling the story as a writer, and that's what people should really want to be. And then I ran across a movie called Garden State that has like no 3-act structure and no real story. It was just a lot of great performances.
That movie's about it's about a bunch of kids that are
aimless.
Chaotic, pretty much, right?
Well, it's aimless, I would say. I don't know how much chaos is in there, so much as
I haven't watched it, but I remember in high school, my friend and I, we would do this thing called garden stating, where we would go out and do like a crazy thing that we were just like, let's go do that. And he called it garden stating because of named after the movie, but I never watched the movie.
No, I think that's good because there is no plan to it. There's no structure to it. And as a writer, that made me sit back and say, oh, maybe the acting is where it's at. So I started taking classes, fell in love with acting, and then as an actor, I got frustrated because as a nobody, I'm not going to just step into the next Linkletter film. And that's when I was like, okay, maybe I know how to edit because I'd been editing alongside my acting classes, and maybe I should learn how to work a camera. And so started doing that and creating stuff for me, and my buddy asked me to shoot his music video, and soon people just started hiring me like, hey, well, can you make something for me? Can you make something for me? And I left my job in corporate to pursue acting full time, sold my stocks, which was worth like $20K. Not much to get you through for very long, but to me, I'm like, yeah, 20,000, I can stretch that. And to make my ends meet, I started doing filmmaking, and I'm not an addictive person, but I'm an obsessive person. And whenever I wanted to start studying, film, I was like, okay, I have Netflix. That's all I really need. Like I can learn this, and I just started eating up every ounce of. I stopped watching movies and TV shows the same way. It was just about how can I learn what they're doing behind the camera. Yeah,
which is very different from the average Netflix consumer.
Very.
Because I mean, doesn't Netflix have like 1 billion or something? They're super close to having
983 million. I'm almost through all of them.
Yeah, right. No. I was gonna say their subscribers, they have it's almost like every person in America has it or something crazy, and it's almost every person's paying $12 a month or whatever. So it's that's just insane. It's just a money machine at that point. But I mean, the average person is not watching it thinking, how did they pull off that shot? They're just like, that was a cool shot, or this is really awesome. And they don't really know why it's compelling or why it's captivating them so well. But because, it's never really crossed their mind maybe. They they're just watching a movie. But
which is the goal. I mean, as a filmmaker, you want to do cool shots, and it's kind of one of those things I think you're doing for your peers. But the real reason that you're doing it, at least on the surface level, is because you think it can help draw the viewer in deeper into the story. So if it's not servicing the story, maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Interesting.
So every once in a while, I'll get irritated with a shot by an amazing filmmaker, and I'm like, shouldn't have done that.
You think they're just doing it to just kind of flex a little bit and look at this difficult shot, but it probably wasn't the right shot.
Yeah, and in my nobody opinion, that's about right.
But hey, nobody opinion, but everyone's got an opinion, and I would say your opinion is probably more well-founded than some others. Definitely more founded than mine. So, but that's really cool. So when you said you quit your full-time job to do acting, I'm sure you can kind of gloss over that and I quit my job and sold my stocks, but that was probably a huge internal kind of battle, any kind of big choice like that, dropping out of college or quitting your job or something like that. What was actually going on in your head, and what was your friends and family saying, all that kind of stuff? Yeah,
it's funny. I don't consult family very much with life decisions, maybe ever. Certainly with friends here and there, I'm thinking about doing this, but even then, based on certain history, I know that ultimately I need to be the one making these decisions. And
that's good.
The battle for me was I had an offer to work in New York and LA. This one company had 2 different YouTube channels, and they were like, we love what you've done on your channel. Come do it for us. We have Jay-Z starting a YouTube channel. We'd love for you to work on his channel as the guy. And we have another one out in LA. And I'm a New York guy, so I was like, I really want to go to New York. But the woman who got me the offer was based in LA. She wanted me on her channel. And they were offering me a lot of money. And then my company was like, oh, we didn't know you were interested in moving. Well, move out to LA come to the headquarters in Santa Monica. And neither one of them offered me. I had specific numbers for each of them. For the LA New York company, I was like 6 figures and I'm in. And they came in just under, and I was like, I made a promise to myself. And so I had my agent on the other hand, my acting agent, who said, hey, believe in me. We have opportunities that are springing up out of state. If you're available to make that drive to New Orleans or Atlanta, then I'll get you great auditions, for HBO and the spots that you really want to be. And so I naively jumped in heart and soul. I'm like, well, this is really what I want to be doing. And I'm a pretty big believer in, if there's something you want to be doing, you have to be doing that. And even if it's slightly left of that, maybe don't go too far left, or else you're going to be known and you're going to develop a career in the thing you don't want to be doing.
Yeah. Like, even if you love video editing, but you're editing videos that you hate consuming, you hate watching them or whatever, it's like, I want to be a filmmaker, but you're really just editing someone's shitty videos. Yeah, it's not the same thing.
That's not going to get you your reputation.
And your fulfillment, doing it you're just going to dread getting on. Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And so, I get it. And I certainly live it to a large extent, where I'm having to take on projects that are not ideal and that aren't necessarily in the realm, but I always look for, and I turn down a lot of projects, but the things that I look for is whether or not it's going to grow me in my skill set. Because even if it's not the exact thing I want to be doing, can it get me closer from a technical level or, from an experience level? Then yeah, I'll probably take that on, even if it's lower than the rate that I want.
Yeah.
And I have a pretty healthy rate.
Yeah, and even the story you kind of just told, it reminds me of an analogy I've heard called the Tarzan method, where it's basically this analogy. If you imagine Tarzan on one side of the jungle, he's trying to get to the other side of the jungle, and he doesn't know the exact vines that he's going to swing on, but he's got one vine here and he's got one vine there, and that vine that he grabs is going to eventually lead to another set of vines, and that's going to lead to another set of vines. So there's no correct way for him to get there. It's probably going to be a little zigzaggy, but eventually he's going to get to the other side. And I love that analogy, because people want to think that there's just this straight line from where you are to where you want to be. But really, if you kind of think about it in that way, as long as you're not going, you might even go a little bit backwards, but that might lead you to a better vine that's going to swing you even farther or whatever. So, I love that, what you were saying is I might even take something that might seem a little bit not as ideal as I want, but maybe it's going to bring me that opportunity that I ultimately want to get,
Absolutely. And
people are scared to make that jump sometimes, I think.
Oh yeah. It's terrifying. And that's kind of one of the things I look for too, is especially when I get into the free projects or the creative projects, the first thing I ask myself is, does this scare me at all? And if it doesn't, I maybe don't want to do that. I don't want to live in the comfort zone. I want to challenge myself, and that's the only way you can expand yourself, whether it's, relationships or skill sets. You have to constantly be living outside of your comfort zone. And even doing this podcast, we sat down and I mic'd up, and then suddenly the nerves hit me. I'm like, oh God, that's good. Awesome. I'm live.
Well, because also on your podcast, you're talking about movies and stuff. You're not talking about yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to talk about myself. What am I going to say?
And I heavily avoid discussing myself on the podcast for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because I think sometimes people start a podcast because they want to be, self-flagellating. They really want to make themselves seem cooler than they are or whatever. Even sometimes in the intros, you're listening to the Andrew Deitch podcast. Andrew Deitch is the foremost entrepreneur in the land, and he's done this. It's just kind of funny. And sometimes, it gives you credibility, because if it's your first time listening, you're like, oh, I should really listen to this guy. But then after a while, it's kind of okay, we get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not every episode.
And for me, my whole reason for doing the podcast was not just to discuss movies, but so that I could learn more about filmmaking. Because I'm already doing it. I'm just... when I'm watching a movie, I'm making all these mental notes, but I'm like, I should like make that into some cohesive thought so that I can really, formalize my thoughts and figure out, connect dots that I'm not connecting now. So there's so many times I get to the end of a movie and I look at my notes and they add up to something greater than just, the parts.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. And another thing about podcasts is like it gives you an excuse to actually like sit down and unpack things or discuss things. Chances are we'd never be sitting in a room one-on-one having this discussion if it weren't for a podcast. So it's like it gives you it's strange because you're like, well, we're just having a conversation, but at the same time, since it is being recorded, there's like this unspoken kind of agreement that we're gonna try to have the best conversation as possible. So if you were just chatting with your co-host about a film, you knew it wasn't being recorded, you're probably going to go down some rabbit holes, you're probably going to end up talking about another movie or whatever, but since you know that you're trying to craft this one specific product, you're going to like stay on topic.
100% accurate. And it's nice too because I have this, I often have a very analytical mind and I come in with huge page of notes that I'm going to go through, and then my co-host, Todd, he doesn't. He shows up, he watches the movie, and I know he has thoughts in his head that he's going to get out, but he doesn't formalize it, and that becomes this looser side of the podcast where we're just riffing, and every episode, I'll make a point, and he'll either add on to it or contradict it in a way that I wouldn't have done without him sitting there and being loose, because for me, I'm always tied into my notes, and what does my next note say? And he's just adding all this up and it's washing over him and creating, it's like jazz, where I'm playing a note, but I'm the drummer and he's the trumpetist and he's going to freaking, figure it out on the fly. And it's beautiful.
I love that. That's beautiful podcasting right there. Yeah. And like one instance in particular in the It Follows episode, like you gave it a 10 and then he gave it a 9. And he had like one thing, he said, the kid actors, they were good, but they weren't like the best or whatever. Like, stuff like that. I really love that because a lot of times podcasters will get flack for only having guests on that they agree with. Yeah. And then it just becomes this whole thing of like, it's not an interesting conversation because you're just agreeing with everything that's being said.
Yeah, and that's even analyzing films more and more, I'm realizing the things that we're drawn to are contrasts. Like whether it's lighting contrast and you're being drawn to the highlight or to the silhouette, or there's a contrast in music versus the visual, or a contrast of opinions making a conversation that much more lively. There's so much, beauty in, I guess, against the grain kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, in your head, it's like a one-sided conversation in your head all the time. And if you're listening to two people saying the same thing, it's almost the same thing as a one-sided conversation. So it is interesting how like as humans we need to like talk it out, and it's fascinating. But,
absolutely hash it out.
Yeah. But to go back to your story a little bit, so you said you quit your job, you wanted to do full-time stuff. What was your corporate job? I don't think you ever said.
No. So I wasn't creating any content, and that was probably half of my issue, was I wasn't being creative at all in my work. It was only analysis. I was doing data analysis and kind of viewing, what's doing really well on YouTube right now. And
so it was in the video space, but it wasn't any creative side.
That's exactly it. And so I would schedule all the uploads and try to decide what's going to give us the highest.
This was for which YouTube channel was it?
Expert Village.
Okay.
We had a bunch, like EV was a big one, eHow, and Cracked was another big one. We had a huge network of content. Yeah.
So, but you weren't on any of the creative side of the YouTube videos. It was all like analytical and stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
and it was funny because I wanted to make that transition and they wouldn't let me. But the moment I left the company, they started hiring me out to do all the creative stuff I wanted to do in the first place, except paying me a lot more.
Nice.
So it's weird how that works.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you said you kind of taught yourself how to edit, right? What was your editing software of choice? And
at that point, this was in 2004. I bought off of eBay for like $200. Premiere Pro 2.0, and this was like way back.
Before the CC.
Yeah, way before
What was it called? It was CCS or C... No, it was before that. It was just 2.0, right?
Yeah, after 2.0, it became a
Creative Suite.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gotcha.
So I started learning on that, and at the time, 2004, I just had a lot of downtime, and I started downloading BitTorrent, whatever videos, any video I could get. I was grabbing in. I was like, okay, how can I tell a story to this music video or this music soundtrack. And I would just create it and like, okay, did I tell a story with all these random clips? And so I just kind of started working through there, and I don't know, like kept creating things. And then fast forward maybe 2 years, I went to, so like in 2005, one of my buddies was working for this random strip mall in Round Rock, north of Austin. And this company in the strip mall had a small store kind of filled with a bunch of random businesses, online businesses. And one of them was, what are those Italian charm bracelets? And I was in the back sweating in this room, putting epoxy and tiny pictures into bracelets. And I was making crazy money. And so I worked there for like a year before it slowed down. I got laid off. I saved up so much money. I took a few months off, came back, and I was like, hey, what else do y'all got going on? He's like, oh, we have all these videos that need editing, and I don't have time to do it. And I was like, actually, I'm a video editor. I know how to edit videos. And inside, like, this imposter syndrome is just flaring up. Like, oh God,
Totally.
I'm going to get found out, because I had to learn a whole new software. And that turned, so my kind of amateur video editing turned into a job video editing that eventually turned into side hustle / oh, I do this for a living now.
Yeah.
Completely random every step of the way, for sure. But because I left a media company, they suddenly were like, hey, we're really busy over here. Do you mind taking on this project? And that was only because I'd been doing it on the side. And I'd, shot, edited videos, and I'm like, oh, check out this music video, or check out this, political ad for one of my political heroes that I made just for fun. And they were like, oh God, Wes has actual skills. Get him to do it. We'll pay him whatever, $10,000 here, please. Have fun.
Yeah. So when you were like, so you were just like getting clips from online, right? And you said like torrenting them or whatever, and then reassembling them, re-editing them. Mm-hmm. And you said you had that imposter syndrome. Did you ever feel like, well, I'm not really like, because I'm not shooting them, like I'm not really like, if someone asked me to shoot it, like I wouldn't even know what to do.
Oh yeah, if you would have shown me a camera, it's like, I don't know what to do with that. Is there a record button?
Yeah, exactly.
That's as far, at that point, it was purely the software side of video editing.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't until, like I said, I'd gotten really stumped with acting that I was like, okay, I'm going to buy this camera that my coworker recommended. And it's a little $1,000 DSLR, and I'm just going to run around shooting it. And I think the first video that I shot and edited was my family's Thanksgiving.
That's funny.
And I totally bit off of a section of Elizabethtown, this Cameron Crowe movie, where he edits a section of the film to Elton John, My Father's Gun. And so I used that soundtrack, and I was like, okay, I'll just use that. I love this song. And I'm going to go in. And the only intention I had was I'm going to make a video of my family's Thanksgiving. So it was just a matter of, can I work the shutter speed and the video settings, and can I compose a shot and vaguely turn this into a video? And I think I actually stretched it into a 5 or 6 minute video. It was way outlived its stay. But your family is the easiest audience in the world.
Oh, for sure. Because also if it's shots of them, they're going to get less bored watching a longer video too.
That's right.
Because that's always the thing when you shoot. Sometimes like, if I'm editing a video or something like that, and then I show it to someone, and then I'm watching, I'm like, they're probably bored. Like, this shot was way too long. I let this drag on way too long. Should have cut some of that, or whatever. But if you're showing it to like, if it's them in the video, they're not really thinking about how long it is. They're thinking about like, oh, that was weird, I acted strange there, or whatever. Because like a home video, you can sit down and watch hours of home video, and it's the most boring stuff ever, because it's literally just your mom or dad like with the video camera just aiming it at anything happening. But it's exciting and interesting because you're in it or whatever.
100%. That's so true. And I actually remember the very first piece of filmmaking advice that I can remember ever getting was in 2000. I was in my first tech job, and my boss was a comedian, a stand-up comedian. And we had these, if you did so many sales with one of our partner vendors, then you got these points, and they had a catalog, kind of like Kool-Aid points, except for much fancier toys. And I was just selling the hell out of their product. And I bought like a VHS camcorder. And he was like, okay, here's your first tip. 2 to 10 second clips, and that's it. Don't just let the camera run. You want short clips. So 5 seconds is great. Stop at 5 seconds and then cut to something else. Wait, find something else interesting. And that's always stuck with me. It's like, oh, yeah. It makes sense. The shorter it is, the easier it's going to be to hold our attention.
Because if you watch a music video or any, really like non-talking head video on YouTube or something like that, typically the scene is changing, the camera angle is changing every couple seconds even, especially music videos. Like it's almost every other second. Like it's kind of insane.
It really is. And the more web-centric or phone-centric the content is, even more so. My biggest client or my most consistent client is Tastemade. I do a lot of editing. They're like a cooking website.
Yeah.
And editing their work, their projects, I mean, you might have a 12-second or a 12-frame cut, which is like half a second. And they're cutting on to the next thing because they know the sense of time is totally changing whenever you're watching something on your phone versus on a TV versus in the movie theater. Like relative is the name of the game.
Definitely.
So whenever I'm editing to, something that's going to be watched on your phone, way faster for sure.
So speaking of relative, I want to touch on this right now because we're bringing it up about the phone. So one thing that's very interesting, like with IGTV and all these things coming out, vertical video is now becoming a thing. And to a lot of people's dismay or whatever you want to say, because obviously before everything has always been, horizontal video, 16 by 9, whatever. And now it's shifting where people are now holding their phones vertically. And so people are creating vertical content. What is your... I can already tell by the way your body language is right now that you are not thrilled with it.
Not at all. Like, I get it from... If you're watching it on your phone, it makes sense. But everything else should be landscape because that's the way our eyes are set in our head.
Yeah.
They're next to each other. They're not stacked on top of each other. But to me, there's a bigger emergency that's happening in our film viewing habits. And that's the TV manufacturers set this default motion blur to this crazy...
Motion smoothing and all this crap. Yeah.
If you haven't checked your TV, you need to turn off motion smoothing. And it might have a different name, but please, for the love of everything that's film, change that because we're creating things with a very specific intent that, is going to help communicate the story to you. And you probably don't notice, but trust me, every TV that I run across, I'm checking and I'm probably changing it.
Yeah. The first time I ran into that was... one of my friends, because my family was always like late adopters with technology. So my family, we still had like a standard definition TV for a long time. And, all my friends had high definition TVs and stuff in their homes. And I remember going over and watching I think it might have been like a remastered version of like Lord of the Rings or something like that. Wow. And I think they had motion smoothing on or something. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was just so eerie and weird. And I even brought it up to them. I'm like, does this look weird to you guys? And I think they were just used to it because they had it on or whatever. And it was the first time I ever actually remember seeing that. And from then on, I've always been on kind of the lookout for that kind of stuff. But most people just, they're like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Bless you, sir. It's a fight worth fighting.
Yeah. And for people that don't understand what that is, it's kind of like the TV, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's like adding extra frames in between the actual frame rate. So where, if you're looking at something with your eyes and I move my hand in front of my face, I'm seeing a blurred hand versus an exact hand every, I'm probably not doing a very good job of it audio. I'm kind of moving my hand in front of my face, but basically they're adding artificial frames in between the frames that are actually there. And it gives this weird...
It makes it look like a soap opera or, a TV show instead of that cinematic look. And that's kind of this blanket statement people throw out is, does it look cinematic? And that's one of the things they're talking about is does it have the proper motion blur and the proper frame rate that we associate with movies. And whenever they do these things with TV, the motion smoothing, they're creating a higher refresh rate, which is great for sports and it's great for video games.
Totally.
But I will sacrifice those things for the sake of movies and TV just because that's more of what I'm going to be watching and dealing with. And even if I'm playing a video game on my TV, it's not going to help make the game that much more enjoyable, but it can really remove the enjoyability of the movie that I'm watching.
Yeah, especially with someone with like the trained eye and everything, of course. Like, because if the filmmaker's going for a specific look and then it's basically the TV's just like gonna screw it all up, like it defeats the purpose.
So my question for you, what's your favorite movie?
That is a good question. I think my go-to for the past few years is The Dark Knight. I love The Dark Knight.
Nice.
I watched it when I was, I think I was like in high school when it came out, and like I just loved everything about it, and I really liked Batman Begins, and then I felt like The Dark Knight just built upon that, and I just loved it. But I actually do not like The Dark Knight Rises.
Agreed.
I did not like it at all. It felt very different, but The Dark Knight is a really good movie. And also, actually, it's interesting that on your podcast I listened to Ex Machina. I really liked Ex Machina. Like, that one just stood out to me as like a really just awesome movie. Like, very different, very unique. I love that one as well. So those are like two that like come to mind whenever someone asks me.
Excellent taste. No, I'm a huge Nolan fan.
Yeah.
My favorite is Interstellar, which is also made by Nolan. So
such a good movie.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But Alex Garland, I was telling you before, like he wrote and directed Ex Machina. Now is his first time directing. And he's my favorite screenwriter. I mean, he wrote The Beach, 28 Days Later, Sunshine, which is a hugely underrated sci-fi film.
I need to check that one out.
Yeah. And he adapted Never Let Me Go, which is great. I haven't read the book, but the movie I think is just incredible. So Ex Machina, great taste there.
Thank you. Yeah, I was excited because for people that we haven't fully explained your podcast, but we've totally talked about it a lot. You're analyzing movies and stuff, and so yesterday, Kat was like, "Oh, my friend Wes is going to be in town. You should have him on your podcast." And so basically, last night and today, I've been looking at your podcast and looking you up and stuff. And I was really excited to see that one, and also It Follows. Those are the two that I chose first to listen to because I also really loved It Follows. I actually saw that one in theaters.
Same.
And that was I don't go to the movie theater a lot, especially now, just because so convenient to just watch it in the convenience of your home and all that. But yeah, It Follows was a really good one to watch in theaters.
So good. The one thing that's nice about, I'm living in Austin, and we have the Alamo Draft House, which is a completely different movie going experience. Is
that where you get food in the theater? Yeah, you get food. You have waiters that come by, and they also kick out anybody who's talking or texting in the movie theater. Really?
Yeah. So it's like a very clean movie going experience.
Huh. So they're like, we're the only ones that can interrupt you by coming up, but if you're interrupting, we're kicking you out. Yeah. I like that. Hey, that's nice. I actually really like that. There's a little place called Eddie's Attic in Atlanta that's like a tiny little place for musicians and stuff, and they have a really strict rule about talking and stuff like that. They're always on their shirts. It literally says "shh" on the shirts because when the musician is performing, they want you to be watching the musician. Cool. Yeah, it's really cool. Because, sometimes people are, it's like go out to the outside bar if you want to talk. If you're inside the room where the musicians are playing, be quiet. So it's cool. I like little areas like that where they keep it sacred. Because there's too many people that do not have any kind of etiquette when it comes to stuff like that. Especially with phones. They don't realize how distracting it is for other people. It's
super distracting. And to me, it's so important when you're watching a movie to give the, not just your attention, but the opportunity for the film to make its impact on you. Like, even whenever I would listen to new albums, I would listen from beginning to end because I feel like the really great artists are trying to create a complete experience, and I want to, try to see what they were trying to create. And with a film, if it's a movie, a drama, or something like It Follows that's trying to get under your skin, and every 20 seconds you're undercutting the tension with your jokes or your commentary, well, it's not going to affect you the same way as if you just let it wash over you. Yeah, and I feel like that's why it is a little bit more important to watch the movie in a theater as well, because you have that like communal experience. Totally. Where you're, because if you're in your home and you're with your family or whatever, you might be tempted to just like, say a joke or whatever.
I'm guilty of that all the
Or
time.
pause it or check your laptop or phone.
Yeah, but if you're in the theater, like, you are not in control of that viewing experience at all. So you are like a passenger, so you got to respect that.
Yes.
And you got to respect the other people and stuff. And
completely agree.
Yeah.
And even for me as a film lover, like sometimes I'll still get into this mode where I might be half watching something and checking my phone. And so that's a big reason why I go to the theater to watch a new movie or even sometimes an older movie. They also like to play these old black and whites, and it's like, oh, cool, I get to go watch, Humphrey Bogart do his thing on a big screen, and it's such a unique experience that I don't want to trash it up with my, bad habits.
Yeah, exactly. Do you, so obviously now all movies pretty much are shot in like a digital format, and of course, purists are, very into shooting on film. Like I know Tarantino, like one of his, what was the one recently that he shot it on?
Hateful Eight.
Yeah, Hateful Eight. Like that one was like one of the
like Super Panavision.
Yeah, it was like a really big deal because he shot it on film, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, you got to go to this specific theater because they're showing it a certain way or whatever." I can't remember exactly the specifics, but like people were really geeking out about that because there's just like this certain look, kind of like people that are like, "Oh, I gotta have it on vinyl" versus a digital copy because there's just that little thing you lose. Same thing with the digital motion smoothing, things like that. Like we're losing the elements of cinema. Like, do you think that we're gonna hang on to that, or do you think this coming new YouTube centric younger generation is gonna not really care about maintaining any of that?
I think there's a bit of a cycle that's happening. Like even referencing vinyl is a really good example of, there's all this new, we can get iTunes on our phone or whatever, but then people are starting to appreciate vinyl again. It does add a texture and an experience to the process of listening to your music. And I am certainly one of those nerds that is like, I want film. I just shot my first music video on Super 16 millimeter film.
Wow.
Which is Kodak, analog, like there's celluloid running through the camera. And it was super exciting, and I'm in the middle of editing the video right now.
How do you go about editing on film? Like, I don't even know that process.
Yeah, so the process is from beginning to end. You obviously have your camera and your magazines, and you call up Kodak. And I actually had lunch a couple days ago with my Kodak rep, Jeremiah. And you call him up and you say, hey, give me 3 rolls of Super 16, this type of stock. He ships it to you. Because it's film, it can't touch daylight. And so in order to even load it onto the magazine, you have to do it in pitch black. And I have this big changing bag that you put everything in, you zip it up, and you just sneak your hands into these little cubby holes. And you load it that way, and then you put it into the camera, film it. Once you're done, you put it back in the changing bag, and you download it into the canisters. And then you ship that back for me, I shipped it to Kodak, where they processed it with the chemicals, and then once it's processed, now it can touch daylight, and then they'll scan it so that now it's a digital file. Now it's a very deep 12-bit digital MOV file, and that I can edit, right? Of course, the tricky part is because Super 16, so there's a difference between 16 millimeter and Super 16, and that's the size of the film. And everyone's probably familiar still with the idea of the perforations on the side, those little holes.
Yeah, that's so that it can feed it, right?
That's correct. Like the sprocket, the claws, latching onto that. Well, a long time ago, they realized, oh man, you know what? One side of that is optical. That's where you're recording sound onto the film. What if we didn't use that? And what if we cut off those sprockets over there? We could widen the amount of film available to record an image and have a little bit more resolution. And so Super 16 is removing one side of the perforations and the optical sound. But that introduces a problem of there's no sound on the film itself. So how do you sync sound? Like if you're recording sound separately, how do you get those to match? And that's where you get the slate, that thing that people clap in front of the film, the lens. It's like, mark, click. And that's that slate, that
the actual sound and the touching.
Yeah.
Because it's a visual and an audio thing. Like the camera is picking up the actual exact moment that it's hitting, and then the microphone is hitting up the exact moment that it's hitting because you get that nice click.
Which looks like what?
Which looks like a nice sharp spike in your audio waveform.
Damn.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and so that's what we were doing during the music video. I mean, I just busted out like a little zoom because we didn't need good audio because it's a music video. We already have the soundtrack. We just need to be able to sync what he's saying to that soundtrack. So we record scratch and then sync it in post with the slate.
Nice.
And from there, now you have everything lined up, and
that's really cool. Yeah, because I remember my friend telling me about like I was just talking about with Quentin Tarantino's movie where he did the Super 16 thing, but I was like, how do you even, because that the idea of editing actual film is so foreign that I'm just like, are you like cutting it, like are you piecing it together, like what are you doing,
that is the way they would do it, obviously,
back
old
in the
school,
day.
but
And even like I've seen where there were like composite photos where they would do that, where they would take like actual, multiple layers of film, stuff and like make a composite photo.
That's right.
And that's amazing because it's like,
that's how you do special effects.
Yeah, like Photoshop, you can easily like erase your mistakes or whatever. With that, like you mess up, you got to like print a new film or whatever.
Yep.
And like you said with special effects, you're literally like layering on like another layer on top.
And then recording that as your final image. It's crazy, but to me, there's a lot of reasons to shoot film. There's something that is doing with the skin. There's a texture to it that isn't replicatable through digital, at least at the moment. And there's, for me, budget-wise, it's much easier to shoot on film than it is to rent one of those expensive digital cameras. And that might surprise people because you think, well, digital's cheaper. Well, not always. If I want to make a movie, I have access to the same thing that Aronofsky uses on Black Swan and Wrestler and Mother. Like he's using the same film that I'm using, and it's just now the only thing it comes down to is, can I write as good? No, but can I get the great actors, and can I tell as good of a story? That's ultimately, it levels the playing field in a way that I can't get to right now on the digital front.
That actually leads into a really interesting topic that I wanted to ask you, is like the accessibility of filmmaking and videography and YouTube and all this stuff. Like obviously in the past few years, technology is getting better and better and better. Phone cameras are getting better. DSLRs and actual real cameras are getting cheaper and better and all that stuff. And so that's creating like a new group of people that are attempting to go into this field, which is making it more competitive and probably increasing like the level of back in 2010 or whatever, YouTube videos where you could get away with having a pretty crappy YouTube video and it could go could be a big hit. And now it's like, you're not shooting 4K, like what are you doing? Like, so it's like it's elevated everyone, but at the same time it's also introduced like, again, like Instagram stories and Snapchat stories where there's no real thought of like, is this shot cinematic? You're just trying to like capture what's going on. And so like, where do I would be interested to know your thoughts on like what you kind of think about this emergence.
I have to love it because I wouldn't be a filmmaker without it. I didn't have access to film or even VHS tapes, to record on as a kid. I came from a pretty poor background. My parents did an amazing job of providing what they did, and it just wasn't enough to start providing for film school or camcorders. So I have a really huge appreciation for it. And even, I think in the film community, we call it something like the democratization of video or cameras and technology. And I think it's amazing. It's such a good way to introduce people to filmmaking. And even if not, like one of my side hustles is actually teaching business people how to make videos for themselves. And I have courses and whatnot that I've been working on. But there's no reason that it has to be relegated to just me and just to the film community. It should be accessible to businesses because it's such a great way to create a new connection with your audience and to your clients. So I have a really big appreciation for it, even if it's not always top quality. That's fine. Hopefully, there's this thing that you've probably heard of, the curse of knowledge, where for me as a filmmaker, I think it's super easy. Like anybody can do what I can do because I'm so familiar with it, even though if you had asked me that same thing 6 years ago or 8 years ago, that Could you make a video? No, I don't know what I'm doing. But now, because I'm so familiar with it, I think something similar happens with a lot of people. They look at what I do and what a photographer might do and say, oh, I can do that. Like, it's not worth as much as you want me to pay you for. But you know what? Great. You know what? Pick up your video camera and then create it. And then you'll get an idea. Oh, it actually is a lot harder, because that's when that curse knowledge kicks in. Like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
I'm not as well versed in this thing, that just because I'm inundated with it doesn't mean I know what to do, how to create it.
Exactly. And I think also, like, with the introduction of like phone cameras, getting better and better and better, but there is kind of this ceiling of how good they can get. There's just physical hardware limitations of how good a phone camera can get. And I think people get that false like confidence, I guess, too, because I was the same way. Like, I recently, last year, bought my first like real camera. It was like Canon 70D. So I had like, oh cool, it's got like interchangeable lenses and blah blah blah.
My first one was a 60D.
There we go. Yep. It's a good camera. Like,
great camera.
It's cool. It's got the flip out screen, so it's very versatile. Blah blah blah. And I realized, like, oh wow, and like, I can create a way better image than I can with my phone. And not only that, but like, if you don't know how to use it the right way, you hand it to someone who doesn't know how to use it, and they can't even like take a picture. You know what I mean? Even with pretty much fully automatic settings, like, you still gotta like finesse it a little bit, and
Totally. That's one of the challenging things about making a film or even a video with more than one angle or more than one edit is. With a photo, man, I'm not a photographer. I have so much respect for someone who can tell an entire story in one single frame. But with photography, you only need one good frame. With a film, you need like 10,000 good frames that all connect with each other, that all have the same color space and color balance, and they're all in focus, and they all have to make sense next to each other. And that's really hard to do if you don't know what you're doing. Like, if you even were to shoot outside, the sun is constantly changing. The clouds are constantly moving around. It might rain. It might not. Like, especially if you need to shoot over more than a day.
Oh gosh.
You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that's something a really experienced filmmaker. And I don't feel like I'm even good enough to shoot over multiple days like that. Like, if I need to film a scene, I'm not as good as the greats. Like, I'm not a Deakins or someone, but I just have so much more room to grow, and that's why I study, and that's why I keep challenging myself.
Yeah. And sometimes you watch, like, for example, me and Kat, actually, we were watching Westworld. And they, at the end, they have like little snippets where it shows like behind the scenes and stuff. And you're like, what? Like, they went to that length to like get this one little thing, or like, even like, I don't even know what
30-foot silk that they've suspended.
That's literally what I was about to talk about, is there's like silks that they put over the sky to balance out the light and stuff. It's just like, what? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Westworld has this great, like, it's all very soft lighting, which is interesting. Because Westerns, I think, more traditionally have this really hard lighting. But because it's futuristic Western, they want this softer light. And then on top of that, they also want a lot of what's called negative fill, which is where you have kind of these shadows on the camera side. So if the camera's shooting you from one angle, you kind of want the shadows to come in front of the camera, which is going to add depth. And so you'll have this big silk on one side that's softening everything, and then you'll have this big black duvetine or some kind of fabric that's cutting out the light from bouncing back into another side of the face. So you're constantly surrounded by white and black in order to get the exact proportions of light that you want. Because that's all you're doing with a video, right? Is you're capturing light.
Exactly. Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. Like, when you especially like when you look at behind the scenes stuff, because when you're watching the movie, you're only seeing what the camera is capturing. But anything outside of that frame, like, typically is going to be something that you're like, what? Like, they're doing all that on the side. There's all these people behind the camera. Like, what's going on? Got, all kinds of crazy stuff. Or like, even just watching, some of the stuff that happens with green screen stuff. You're like, this is the image that was captured on the camera, and this is what I watched. it's not even the same thing at all.
Not at all. Like if you watch Iron Man behind the scenes, right? It's just Robert Downey Jr. in a black suit.
Jumping around and like, doing goofy stuff. I think there was one that kind of went viral recently from like one superhero movie where the guy's like doing some wind thing with his arms, and like the behind the scenes is hilarious because he looks so goofy. He's just like like with his arms like just in front of him, and like some other girl like just jumps, and then like the finished product looks awesome.
It looks awesome, and it to me should help people understand how committed an actor has to be to what you're doing, because you do look ridiculous on set.
Yeah.
But you also are trusting, your director and the special effects team, your editor, like you're trusting all these people to make you not look stupid.
Yeah.
Especially on something like that where you're, being a superhero.
Yeah.
That can't do any of the things.
Right. Exactly. You're not an actual superhero.
Yeah, you're just John.
Yeah. Exactly. I was gonna ask you too. So you said you were pursuing acting as well, and like you said you had an agent and stuff. What types of projects like have you been in, and what types of stuff like do you like to be in? Like what are your
dramas,
ideal roles?
In my ideal world, I would just do dramas. Like I'm a very big genre guy. I love sci-fi, horror, blah blah blah. But for acting, like just give me the dramas. That's where all the good stuff. And any good movie, no matter if it's an action film or not, should have a good character-based drama within it. And that's what's going to ultimately add tension to the action. That's why you care about whether or not they succeed or fail, is based on the drama, is the good story. And so that said, I still want to do more pure dramas as an actor. But I left my agent a few years ago, 2 years ago maybe, where I just wasn't happy with the direction. They merged with another agency that I had bad experiences with in the past, and so I was like, I'm ejecting. And so for now, the only stuff I act in is usually going to be what I create.
But that's kind of cool though, because you're in control.
Yeah, but it also adds an element of I really do have like bad imposter syndrome, so I feel bad for anybody who's in one of my projects that I'm also acting in, because that means I have to do the editing. And I put that off as long as humanly possible. I'm like, I don't want to watch myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to edit my performance. It always turns out fine, but it's that process of getting over myself that I'm not very good at. I take myself too seriously. I'm a very, very sensitive soul. So that's one of my, deals.
Yeah. One of my friends was starting a podcast, and like she was trying to edit herself, and like she had some knowledge of like editing and stuff, but like video editing, but not like audio editing at all, like with podcasts. And like, she's kind of like, well, I can do the video and audio for video stuff, so I can probably like just take away the video side and I've got just the audio. And like, I think she was just really self-conscious of how she sounded and everything, because she was like, I've been working on one episode for like a month. This is torture. And I'm like, this is why I don't really cut much, because I'm like, I sound how I sound, and if I hate how I sound, then I'm just going to try my best to sound better next time. You know what I mean? And for better, for worse. But it is true, like editing your own voice and like being comfortable, like watching yourself and cringing at like, oh, why did I do that? Or like, oh, that was weird. Why did I say it like that? Or whatever.
I've gotten weirdly comfortable editing my audio. That took a while, but now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, yeah, I am what I am, and I just need to withstand it for the next hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I'm done with me.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right. I mean, it's tough, man. It's really tough. It's, holding up the mirror is never going to be, I think, an easy process. And as an artist, and to me, even podcasting is an art, like there's so much vulnerability in creating anything. Right now, I think the biggest issue in our society really is the inability to let someone be sincere. Sincerity, we'll love it for 3 seconds, and then as soon as that time is up, we're mocking it.
Do you think that's an American thing, or do you think that's an internet thing?
That's a fair question. I mean, certainly a combination of the two. It's certainly a removal of humanity through the internet. Yeah. But it just bothers me so deeply that we don't let things be sincere and authentic. It's too sensitive. It's too vulnerable.
Yeah. One thing my friend, she's from Germany. One thing that she said to me one time is, so the first time we met, we were we were in Italy, and like it was the weirdest circumstances that we met, and like we were both. It's kind of interesting. We were both au pairs. I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, but for you, you've never heard it. So
What?
We were au pairs. So we lived with a host family. We basically like hung out with their kids and taught them English. Basically, long story short, and both of our host families were friends. And they were on like a little week-long vacation at the beach. So of course we went with them. And so like I met this girl. She was like the other au pair. I was the other au pair. It was kind of like, oh cool, whatever. And and I had like a friend, right? Oh, what a pair.
Sorry.
And at first, that was good. And she was German. And at first when I heard that, I'm like, oh, I hope she can speak English. She spoke perfect English. She spoke great English. She'd actually been an exchange student in America. But anyways, but one thing that she told me was when the last night that we were at the beach, I'm like, I said like, bye, I'll see you again or whatever. And she's like, you're never gonna see me again. And I'm like, she's like, you Americans are too optimistic with that type of stuff. She's like, she wasn't, she was being nice about it, but she's like, it's so funny. You Americans are like so optimistic. Like you never want to be real with like, saying goodbye or like, something being bad or whatever. Like you always want to be way too optimistic, and for better or for worse, it's like, I think as Americans, we kind of have that like American dream thing where we want always look at the silver lining, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you got to be realistic, and we don't want to be realistic. We want to, have it perfectly fabricated and have the perfect Instagram picture and have the perfect life and all this stuff. And you can't let anyone know that, something bad might happen or whatever. And that stuck with me because I'm like, you know what? But I did see her again, and I did meet up with her again. So I told her, when I met up with her the second time, I'm like, you said that we wouldn't meet again, and we did. So I ended up visiting her in Berlin. So I was the optimistic American, but I followed through. So
that's awesome. But I completely agree. Like
it's so true, though.
A lot of the films that I gravitate to are more indie, and they have harder landings and messages, and it's going to be more challenging. And right now, we're just at a point where to go back to the food analogy, we're used to our fast food. We don't know how to appreciate a good home cooked meal anymore. And all the best films, in my opinion, are going to be things that they're not sweet. They're not perfectly ketchuped out. It's going to be something that you have to develop a palate for. And you have to begin to appreciate, oh, here's why this white is really good. And I love
a mature palate.
Yeah, you have to mature your palate up. Because not everything, and I love Marvel films, but not everything's going to be this Marvel universe where, the good guy wins in the end or whatever.
It's funny because that's actually, when I was younger, my parents were, I was raised in like a Christian home and stuff. My parents didn't want me watching Harry Potter. And I remember like one of the things that my mom said was like, it's like magic, witchcraft, blah, blah, blah. It's like, all that stuff. But but one thing that stuck out to me, she was like, yes, and I've also heard like, about the movies that sometimes the good guys don't win or something like that. And I was like, but like sometimes the good guys don't win in real life too. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, it's just kind of, it was the first time I actually thought of that, but I was like.
That's why they're called martyrs.
Right?
They didn't win.
Yeah, literally, they didn't win. The good guy didn't win. And those are sometimes the most interesting stories because it's, we want the good guy to win, but you're not always going to win. There's
conflict. It's funny. I mean, on a completely off-topic side note, like whenever I was learning how to edit, I had so much downtime because I was going into full-time ministry at the time. Like now I'm agnostic and I don't have any ill will or whatever towards any religion, but
agnostic meaning like it's kind of ambiguous, right? Like is that exactly what it means?
I would lean atheist.
Gotcha.
But
I
don't
want
know.
to definitively say
That's right.
There's no God, because atheist is saying I believe 100% there's no God. You can't convince me otherwise.
I have no idea, so I'm completely open.
I think agnostic is a term that more people probably identify with, but they go with atheist just because they want to like.
Oh yeah. It's more definitive and more self-assured.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But I think there's, again, not to go down the super deep rabbit hole, but agnostic is like very respectable because you're saying like, I don't know, and I don't think maybe anyone knows. Yeah. You know what I mean? I like that. But anyways.
Same. And so, that's whenever you're talking about Harry Potter, I had the same kind of views and thoughts until, I don't know, I started unwinding and unpacking some of that stuff. So I totally relate to... Mm-hmm. There was a period when everything wasn't permissible. Yeah,
and it was interesting because like growing up, I didn't I know I don't resent any of that. Like I'm not like, oh man, I should have been able to watch Harry Potter because now I would be way more in that community or whatever. I don't feel like I really like missed out. I just went to Harry Potter World last week and like I still had fun. I know enough. Like it's still cool, but it is weird how there are cultural things that you can miss out on. Not even just by not watching a movie, because like now I've watched some of the Harry Potter movies, but there's not that same like feeling when like everyone's watching this thing and there's this craze around it. Like for example, Pokemon was one of those things where like if you were in that craze, like Pokemon Go, especially like when that first came out, that was like such a huge moment. And like now there's a lot of people who play Pokemon Go, but it wasn't this thing where
this community was there. Yeah.
And like everyone was doing it. Kind of like, when Lost was on. I loved the show Lost. And I caught onto it late. And I remember reading all these forums that were like years old. And I'm like, damn, I wish I could like have conversations about theories and stuff like that with these people. But like they're not even active anymore. And like probably a lot of these people don't even watch the show anymore. You know what I mean? So it was just kind of funny how like...
Lost is what got me into TV. Like I didn't...
Same.
I grew up out in the country. I didn't have cable television. The only things I got as a kid were movies. And so I became very familiar with all these different movies and random B movies and all... Not that many TV shows, and so whenever I finally got access to cable, I still didn't watch TV until Lost popped on, and so I have very strong emotions about Lost.
Yeah.
Particularly how they finished the series.
Well, one thing that actually, sorry, were you going to say anything? I was going to say one thing that you brought up.
And if you didn't catch it, that was nah.
Yeah, exactly. Nope, I don't want to say anything else. Nope. Yeah, I have a bad taste in my mouth from the ending too, but what I was going to say that was interesting, you brought it up in one of the podcasts I listened to, is how in a film you want the beginning and the end to kind of like mirror each other a little bit.
To communicate with each other in some way, yeah. I think an intelligent film often, not always, that's not a hard rule, but I think often, the opening and closing should have something to do with each other. And like if you were to watch Birdman, and then step out, and if you were to watch the very opening edit and the very closing edit, they're communicating something else about the film that you would never otherwise see if you didn't just kind of juxtapose those against each other. And so, I think there is a lot of intelligence to how, especially the opening shot is immediately establish you in the world, whether that's the title sequence or the actual first scene. And then however you end that should certainly be communicating something just as profound. It's like the first line of a book and the last line of a book, man.
Yeah.
Those should sing off the page.
Yeah. And the reason why Lost came to mind is like Jack laying in the forest,
That's right.
Because apparently, I can't remember where I heard this, but apparently those two shots were filmed on the exact same day. Because they knew that that's how they exactly wanted to end it. Wow. But in the ending, it's slightly different. Obviously, I don't care about spoilers because if people haven't watched it now, like, whatever. Maybe I'll inspire them to watch it. But I think at the end, there's like the dog is in the scene, and in the beginning, it's not, or something like that. And then the reflection in his eyes is different or something. But it's basically like the same scene. And apparently, they did film it on that same day. So actually, a lot of the actors, because a lot of the filming was out of order and stuff, they knew kind of what was going to happen in the end, but they actually didn't really know how exactly it was going to end.
Yeah, there's a whole, obviously, gap in process.
And there's also, certain scenes that end up getting cut or certain storylines that don't end up panning out or whatever, and we never get to see that, but the actors are some of the only people that ever did get to see that, which is fascinating because...
Yeah, they get to experience a different version of Lost than we do.
Oh, for sure. And one thing that frustrated me about Lost was the guy that played Saeed.
Yeah,
he never watched a single episode of Lost.
Whoa!
And I was like, how? Like what? Like as a fan, I was like almost like offended. Like I love you in this show, and you've never even watched it. But he's the way that he kind of said it was like he felt like watching it would almost kind of take him out of his character and how he wanted to portray the character, and then also like he knew the storyline from acting in it, and he felt like watching it might screw up his understanding. Like, because sometimes his character might not know things that other people in the show might not know.
Right.
Like, he might not be involved in a scene that, where something is spoiled that his character doesn't even know about.
God,
and I'm like, that's fascinating, because I never thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
I got to meet, I say meet very, very loosely, on set. I worked as an extra on a Robert Rodriguez film. And he was on set, and I was just surprised. Like, I'm very tall. I'm 6'4", and he's very not. He's probably like 5'8".
Really?
So it's just always surprising meeting someone who on screen looks like the biggest person in life, And you're like, oh yeah, that's interesting what the camera can add to a persona.
Well, another thing that I've heard is like, you say the big screen, like a movie, you're typically watching it on a bigger screen than, a YouTube video, for example. You're probably watching it on your phone or whatever. And I've heard that it actually can translate in different ways. Like, Tom Cruise, you see him in a restaurant, you might be more hesitant to walk up to him because you're like, holy shit, that's Tom Cruise. But if it's like your favorite YouTuber and you almost feel like you know them personally and you're watching them on a smaller screen, you feel like you know them. Whereas like Tom Cruise, like you don't feel like you know him.
Yeah.
You know who he is, and you've seen him play a lot of characters, and like, but that big screen can make people larger than life, and then the small screen like can make people even so comfortable with you that they're gonna walk up to you while you're feeding your baby or whatever, and like totally maybe even disrespect you slightly.
That's so interesting. I hadn't considered the impact of just the medium itself.
I've heard podcasters is kind of similar, because like literally the fans of your podcast have listened to you for hours and hours and hours, and they feel like they know you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird thing that I've had to get used to, where people are like, not in a fanboy way, but it almost kind of feels like it a little bit. Like, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and then you're like, whoa, like, I wonder, like, what do they know? I don't know anything about them, but they know something about me. You know what I mean? It's a weird thing to get used to.
And I feel like I've done that once, where I was a complete jackass, and I'm a very introverted person. I'm not this outgoing, gregarious personality. But I was at this movie marathon that is for just like movie nerds, and I was at the Alamo Drafthouse, of course. And while I was walking out of the restroom, and in line for the restroom was Elijah Wood. And I just like the day before seen one of his films called Green Street Hooligans. And I was like, Elijah Wood, bro, I just watched Green Street Hooligans. Great job. And I kind of like tapped him on the stomach and walked off. And I was like, what a jackass am I? Like, I just completely invaded this guy.
Nice job, sport.
I was like, you're a badass. And I'm, a little pat on the head. Like, what an asshole am I? I just felt so stupid afterwards. But
that's funny.
Yeah, there is this weird effect that can overcome someone with that over-familiarization of a personality that you've never met in real life, but it feels like you have.
Yeah, and there's also this weird thing where it's the first time in history where people can be famous but also not necessarily like rich because of it. Mm-hmm. Like typically like a celebrity that like everyone, we all had, back in the day, all the celebrities were kind of like universally known, and now there could be some YouTuber that every kid in America knows who they are. They might not even be that wealthy, maybe because, for whatever reason, but like a ton of kids know them. But then they don't have maybe the money to hire like a security team or whatever, and then they're like vulnerable to all kinds of other problems. Like there's like certain like Twitch streamers and stuff that have had things happen where, during a stream, like someone will shoot at their house or something. Like that happened recently, where some guy figured out the address and like, thought it'd be funny to shoot a gun at their house during a live stream, like for whatever reason.
My God.
And luckily that guy, it seemed like he had the, means to, I can't remember exactly who it was.
Was it Ninja?
It wasn't Ninja.
Okay. That's the only one I know. I read an ESPN article on him recently, and that was blew my mind how much money he's making off of live streaming.
It's pretty absurd. It is pretty absurd. And like the weird thing is people don't tend to, this is what I love about podcasting is you get a window into someone else's life, and that's what I try to do as like a host is, try to have a conversation about things that, maybe people haven't thought of before or whatever. And, we're having this conversation about filmmaking. Probably a lot of people, you just watch Netflix and they've never considered these things or whatever, things like that. And one thing that people are like, why would you want to just watch a person play a game? It's like, do you understand what sports are? Like, do you understand what basketball? You're literally watching people play a game. It's like a different
Touché.
thing. And I had that same thought, like, why would I want to watch someone play a video game when I can just play it? But like why would you go play basketball when you could just play it? Like, you're probably not that good, and you can appreciate someone who's really good. Like, you can appreciate watching LeBron James, like Ninja, like is like the LeBron James of Fortnite or whatever. Like, you can appreciate it. And same thing goes with any kind of other things. Like, some people, I like to go to music festivals, and people are like, why do you want to go to music festivals all the time? And, you know, it's like, why do you want to go to a baseball game all the time? Like, you know, you want to be in this community of people who are all really psyched about baseball, and you're watching this performance. And same thing with music festivals or whatever, you know?
What's the best musical experience you've ever had?
Ooh. That's a hard one. I'm trying to think.
Because if you go to like a lot of music festivals, I'm sure you've had some pretty mind-blowing experiences.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are like electronic music festivals, like DJs and stuff like that. So like, you're kind of like, it's kind of like a different experience than seeing like live music, you know what I mean? So, but I've been to Tomorrowland in Belgium. It's
What
like
is
this
that?
crazy, it's kind of like the mecca of electronic music festivals. Like, everyone must make one pilgrimage, you know, kind of thing. Like, it's like 5 day, or it's like 4 days, Thursday through Sunday, and then like there's 18 stages. Oh my so, you know, you think like electronic music, it's like, you know, one genre, but then you've also got all these like subgenres underneath. Like, you've got like, you know, techno house, you know, all these like, and then you've got like tech house and bass house, and, you know, all these little like weird subgenres. So every stage is curated by a different like curator at each day. So depending on where you go at these different stages, you're going to hear slightly different, you know, music or whatever.
What is that, like 100 artists in order to
More,
pack that out?
it's like 1,000 over the weekend, and like you have like 300 per day, and so like there's no way you can even. It's like overload. It's basically like Disney World for you know electronic music. It's crazy, but that whole experience is like amazing, because you're just, not only is it you know, so cool to be there, but the decorations and like everything, the level that they go to make the production so awesome, like that experience, that whole
badass.
experience is like awesome.
I got to go to a day in ACL. I haven't done a lot of ACL, which sucks because I'm an Austinite. But I went to one day. My favorite band is Foles. They were playing, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go listen to them. They had some other artists that I really love, and it just became this like pretty magical day that ended with Radiohead playing. And
Nice.
I found this spot on the side of a hill because I'm like, I don't like people touching me that I don't know, and that's all like the front row is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, I'm gonna find an empty spot on the side of a hill, lay down, stare up at the sky, and let Radiohead freaking jam out. And it was just like this incredible experience. Certainly my favorite musical experience. But
That's awesome. That was an ACL?
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Doesn't ACL also have like another component of it as well as music? Like, isn't there like a technology side or something like
No,
that?
I don't think ACL does. South by does.
South by Southwest, that's what I'm thinking
That's a
of.
massive one. And I haven't done any paid shows, but I've been to a lot of their like free shows. And you know,
That's
you
cool.
run into new artists that you never would have learned otherwise. But yeah, South by is definitely one to go to. But if you're more into a little bit more chill, because ACL is in like this park.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get away from the crazy city. Anyway.
Another musical experience that comes to mind that might throw people for a loop, but it's actually Justin Timberlake, which is really crazy because like my mom loves Justin Timberlake. We got her tickets for her birthday one year, and we all went as a family, and it was just crazy, like just seeing him as a performer, because like he is just genuinely really talented. Like, not only is he an amazing singer, he's an amazing dancer, but then the production that they put on for the whole show, and he doesn't take a break. Like, he's just going for like, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Jeez.
And it's just crazy to me that it's just like one dude performing for a whole stadium, and everyone is there to see that one dude do that thing. And you're just like, what? Like, that guy is real? Like, that's a real person? Like, you know what I mean?
I had the same experience
nuts.
because Jay-Z came through Austin a while back, and I went to his concert, and I was absolutely blown away by the production value. And I mean, you forget how big his catalog is. And so towards the end of the show, I was like, he hasn't played this song or this song, like how's he gonna get to it all? And then he goes on like this 10-minute medley, just dropping verse from one song to the next, and the DJ is just kind of mixing it up, and my hair is like flying away from my face, and it was just like an incredible experience that you just feel gassed by the end of it, and I am just sitting there.
That's one really cool thing about a live performance is you get to see them like mash up songs or like sing it a different way or whatever, stuff like that, and like that's what I personally love about live stuff, because my mom's always like, why don't you just listen to it on the radio? It's the same thing, and it's like, no.
No, but it plays too with acting, like being on a stage and getting that immediate gasp. That's the hardest thing I think with a live performance to get is a gasp from the audience. You can get a laugh, and that's super satisfying too. But getting a gasp is like nothing I've ever experienced, because now you've shocked the audience and you've surprised them, and that's something that it's really hard to game plan and get.
That's true.
Getting that out of them is really satisfying. And then I did this workshop with all actors and agents and casting directors, and you had to go up and perform a monologue for everybody basically. And I was prepping, I was getting ready to do my monologue, and then some other guy goes up and does my monologue. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell am I gonna do now? Like I can't do that twice, they're not gonna laugh at me, and they barely laughed at him. And so I kind of ran out into the hall and I was like, what do I have that guy? And since I'm a writer, I had written this very short, like 60-second short film, and I was like, I'm adapting this into a monologue. And I went in and I performed it, and it's this punchline where it's this guy who's going to a drug dealer every week, and the drug dealer's like, why do you always come here? Why do you do drugs? You seem like you have your shit together. And he tells the druggie, me, tells this guy this story about, I accidentally killed a kid.
Whoa.
And I have to get away, this is my only escape. And he goes into the details of how he killed the kid on accident, and it's just this complete freak accident. And then he's like, the drug dealer's, freaked out, of course. But then he undercuts it. He's like, man, I'm just fucking with you. Like, I just like drugs. I just like and until I'm going through this monologue, I'm just aching, with pain. And everyone, you could hear a pin drop into place. And then I twist that knife, and the place just erupts. And it was the single most satisfying performance of my life, just because
awesome.
These are all performers. These are all people who judge performers.
Exactly.
And they give you notes afterwards, and they were all glowing. But it was just this here's what kind of spelt the beginning of the end with me and my agent, because he was there in front row. He was one of the judges, the critiques. And
Before he was your agent or after?
Yeah, he was my agent there during the time. And he never said anything to me. Like, he never gave me a high five and was like, hey man, you killed that. He never said a word. And I was like, all right, bro, it's all good.
Yeah. Got to give credit where credit's due, bro.
Yeah, I was like, dang. And I'm not someone who gets high on my own work at all. Like, don't let me sit and watch my stuff with you. I'll tear it apart. But it was one of those moments like, man, you could, I'm your guy. You're supposed to be out there selling me,
right?
And you're not going to come to me now. Like, okay.
Yeah, maybe maybe in his head he's like, well, that's my guy anyways. I don't need to say anything. He knows that I like him or whatever. But but in your head you're like, why didn't he say anything? Like, what the heck? Everyone else said something. You're my guy. What the fuck? Yeah.
But it was so satisfying. Like, whether it's live music, I think, or live performance of some kind, just that interaction between the artist and the audience you can't replace it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think I feel like, especially with stand-up comedy, that's something that you have to do in front of an audience. Like, you can't just sit in front of your camera and record a stand-up comedy set and expect it to be, it's something that has to be performed in front of an audience, which is so strange. It's one of those things. Same thing with, theater or whatever. Obviously you can record it, but it's designed to be performed in front of an audience. And I feel like a lot of times, we're kind of losing that to a lot of digital stuff, but at the same time, there are people keeping that alive and whatnot. But do you think that, the story that you just told was great. I've never heard that. I've never heard that concept, of I killed a kid and, that's the reason why I do drugs. That's an interesting story, But a lot of people are kind of have this, idea that all the stories have been told and we can't make exciting films anymore. Everything's the same. And, where do you think things are going in that regard? Do you feel like we're kind of telling the same stories over and over again? Or, how do you shock an audience that's seen everything? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly limited, I think, in the way we look at the world and the stories we want to hear. It's not, I don't think there's a limit in the stories that haven't been told. I think those are still there. We're just not rewarding the people who are telling those odd new stories.
You're like the indie films you're kind of saying.
Yeah, like go watch something weird like Tony Erdmann. Like that's such a weird offbeat story, but it's still relatable. It's still human. You can still dial in with it to some degree, but it's going to be something that you probably haven't experienced before in a theater or on your television screen. But yeah, I think that's kind of at the heart of the issue is just what we're willing to pay for. And Hollywood pays attention to where your dollar goes, and that's what they're going to give you more of. Netflix, like 30 times so. That's why you keep seeing all these terrible sci-fi movies. It's like, oh, people want sci-fi. Just we'll pay whatever. Like, go make more sci-fi, and it's garbage. 90% of it. You're not always going to get whatever an Ex Machina unless you go pay for Ex Machina. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I get really frustrated with just the lack of accountability we put on ourselves as an audience.
Do you think people just see like, oh, special effects, there's a lot of budget behind this thing, it must be good?
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of how the Avengers is a little bit, and like Fast and Furious. Like, like Fast and Furious, like if you look at the most recent ones, it's just like, how is this any different than any of the other ones? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's turned way less into cars and to just like basically a glorified version of like the Avengers or something.
Yeah.
It's like just tons of action, explosions, all that stuff is like, I guess that's their core audience. That's what they want to see. But at the end of the day, like you kind of lost the car people a while ago,
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. Yeah, I mean, there's also that, kind of Ecclesiastes idea that there's nothing new under the sun. And I'm sure to some degree that's true. But I think there's so many interesting ancient stories that we don't tell anymore. Like if we were to go just study a little bit more Greek mythology and Roman mythology and Egyptian, like even I would love to just see period pieces in ancient Egypt that doesn't have to do with kings turning into zombies or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
Like let's just tell an interesting drama about Egyptian people and what their life was like. There's just so many interesting stories about humanity, and that's not even getting into stuff really wild and experimental stuff that I would love to create. Like, what's it really like for another society of alien beings that don't view relationships the way we view them? How do they communicate? What's an offense to them versus what's endearing? Like, are insults offensive and what's an insult?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's really true. And you kind of get some of that from like traveling the world, like what is weird and what is normal to someone else, who's right, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily who's right and who's wrong. It's like, it's just different. You know what I mean? It's like someone a long time ago decided that this was offensive versus someone in this culture decided that was perfectly fine or whatever. Like, farting or something like, farting is disrespectful because you're allowing your odors to infect my nose and, blah, blah, blah. And then in other cultures, like, no, by farting, you're actually respecting me because you're very comfortable in front of me and, or whatever, like
there's an argument to be made.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is, fascinating when, especially I love, seeing other cultures and stuff like that because you get that, you're like, what's right, what's wrong, what's, offensive, what's not, what are the customs, why are they like this, stuff like that. It's fascinating.
And I mean, animal culture itself is really interesting, and it's not as far away, some of them, as from human culture as we'd like to believe sometimes.
Especially like chimps and stuff.
Exactly. Like there's just so many interesting, I mean, you look at the way wolves treat each other, and there's society there's culture there, even if it's not as sophisticated as our own. But they treat each other a certain way. There's leaders, there's a pecking order, and there's a certain expectation about your place in that culture and society. And so there's all kinds of things we can parallel and draw analogies from to create new forms of art that we just, I think that it's going to come back to me for what are you rewarding and what are you kind of punishing?
Yeah. And my friend Alan, I had him on, well, we're friends now because we did a podcast. He wrote a book called The Creative Curve, and it's about being able to think about creativity as like a muscle that you can develop versus a thing that you're born with or born without. And I totally believe that. Like, I totally believe that, if you flex that creative muscle every day, you can become a more creative person. I think you definitely agree.
Yeah, like one of the best classes I ever took in my entire life was in 7th grade English. My teacher, Mrs. Toon, would have us write
Mrs.
every day.
Toon?
Mrs. Toon.
I like that.
And she would, every day we would have to start the class by writing whatever we want. Just create, write. And I remember she told us at the beginning of the year, she was like, you're going to write a sentence today, and every day I'm going to have you write a sentence, and eventually it'll be 2 sentences and then a paragraph. And a paragraph should be at least 3 sentences or whatever.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, by the end of the year, you're going to be writing a full page every day. And that first day of like, I need to write a sentence. What do I want to say? I don't know. But yeah, you just kind of keep flexing that muscle, and eventually you get to that point. I mean, Stephen King's big on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read On Writing, but
I haven't. I've heard really good things though. I need to check it out.
It's incredible. I mean, his first success was a movie about a girl basically going through puberty. And he was telling his wife, and he threw the story away. His wife went into the trash can and was like, read it. No, you need to finish the story. And that, of course, became Carrie. And it was profound that he found a way to connect with this girl that, as a man and a middle-aged man, like he had no way to connect with. And he just started digging through his life and experiences, and he found a way to connect. And it's a creative challenge on its own, but flex your muscles and it'll grow. For sure.
Yeah, and another thing that he introduced in that book that he put it into words. It was like, a thing that I kind of felt like I knew, but he said it really well. It was like, you look at something and you're like, oh, that's really creative, but like, what does that actually mean? Like, you look at something and what is creativity? And it's like the marriage of something that's familiar but also novel at the same time. So like, you're taking something that is you can relate to, but adding like a new element to it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that is so smart, because we can all think of something that was like ahead of its time. You know, it's like it was too new and not familiar enough that people couldn't latch onto it. And
airplanes, it's like a bus, but in the sky.
Yeah, like, and you're like, what are you talking about? But then, like the progression and we start to, you show like a Pilgrim, like dubstep or something like that. They're not even gonna understand it as music. It's like, what are these noises? This alien communication? Like literally, they're just gonna be it's so foreign to them, and they couldn't even enjoy it. But you show it to someone who grew up listening to like heavy metal, and you're like, whoa, this is like kind of a weird like electronic version of that or whatever. And so I think as like a creative and, as a, even as a podcaster, movie videographer, whatever anyone's doing out there, you got to kind of like think about that, because if it's too familiar, it's just like, you're just telling the same story as everyone else, and your stuff's not going to stand out. But if it's too weird and too out there, like it might not stick.
Yeah. How do you relate to it if it's so far unrelatable?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And I love anybody who makes the attempt, for sure. But yeah, I watched a movie recently, just a couple nights ago, and it was just so weird. It's called Mandy, and there just wasn't enough story there for me to grasp onto, but there was certainly the visually interesting stuff that kept me going. And so there is this weird balance of, I want to explore a new area, but yeah, where am I inserting my audience? And that gets into, I guess, a little bit of like storytelling elements, exposition, and how do I make my audience understand this weird world, their context, their frame of reference. I'm very big into giving things a shot at the minimum, but holding to the standard of I don't get it. Like, I know the art community loves what you're doing, but I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, some of the modern art museums, it's like literally like a blank wall or something. It's like, well, it actually portrays and it's like, okay, you're reading a little too into this, bro. Like, it's a blank wall.
Great article that was talking very much about that, where photographers aren't telling the story in their pictures anymore because they're suddenly adding context in the form of a note next to their photograph. Well, if you need that note, maybe you didn't tell your story accurately. And that's one opinion. I'm not saying it's the only opinion, but that's for me as a visual storyteller. Like, I really respect that perspective.
Yeah, makes sense. I feel like we've talked about a lot of stuff. I feel like this is a good place to wrap things up, but. I did want to ask you to kind of close things off. what is some homework? What is some really good stuff that people need to see? What are some good things they need to watch? And of course, they need to listen to your podcast. But they should probably, I feel like your podcast is probably a good place to start. Like, look at the titles and watch some of that stuff.
Absolutely. The PestlePodcast.com is where you can listen to my podcast. Find it on iTunes, whatever. But yeah, watch the movie first. And
for people that don't know what a pestle is, can you explain that real fast?
Yeah, so we call it, that's a good idea. We call it the pestle because we kind of take it like a pestle and mortar. Like the pestle and mortar is that thing where you take corn and you put it on the mortar, and the pestle is the thing that grinds it up and creates flour. And so our idea is we take a movie, we grind it up and see what it's made of, and of course we make something new with it that's probably less wholesome than the movie you just watched. And so our podcast is the new creation. And so, yeah, watch a movie. Go watch, Spotlight or Interstellar, and then you can listen to our thoughts. But I'm trying to find something from a filmmaker perspective that's going to educate you on what they're doing with the story, whether it's themes or the way they're composing their image to help connect with you to the story in a more, fluid way so that you're much more immersed now. And so I think that's one good thing, but I would say find something that you haven't seen before. If you've seen it advertised, it's probably not what I'm talking about. To be really snooty about it. But Aronofsky.
It's a hipster.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
But there's some really great films that it doesn't have to be just rabbit food. It could be Perfect Sense is a good one that's headsy but still really relatable. It's got Ewan McGregor, Eva Green, and it's a story about a virus that spreads across the earth, but it's still got this really intimate, love story kind of woven through it. So Perfect Sense I think is a great one. Never Let Me Go is a great one. It's still very human and it's still going to connect you very well and connect with your emotions. So I don't think just because it's independent, it has to be completely unintelligible. Mother, I think, is probably a stretch for most of our listeners. I think it's interesting and it's chaotic and tense and not something I want to watch over and over again. But it's interesting to kind of discuss after the fact. And that's the things that I find interesting is, can I watch it and then talk about it with someone, not for a podcast, just for the sake of discussion. Because even if it's stupid or it ends on a dumb note, is there something else that they're trying to get to? Yeah.
And at least it made you think or made you have that conversation. Maybe that was the goal, Because sometimes you're thinking this is so dumb. For example, some of Kanye West's new stuff. It's this is so trash. He's literally just trolling us, but I'm talking about it right now. You know what I mean? Right. I'm showing you the video, how stupid it is, quote unquote stupid it is. But maybe he's trying to deeper, whatever. You can analyze it however you want. Absolutely, but it's kind of true.
Completely agree, because there's multiple functions of art. Yeah, there's escapism that we get from the Avengers and Marvel and other things like that. But there's the other stuff that is supposed to help make you more aware of the world and to expand your worldview. And it's okay if you walk away and don't agree with it. I disagree with half the stuff I probably watch. But I'm okay. I'm secure enough in my worldview that I can go and watch that. I'm not gay. I don't have any problem with gay culture or gay people. None of that. But I'm not gay. But I'm still going to go watch movies that are discussing what it's like to be gay. Yeah. I want to watch Moonlight.
You're not afraid you're going to become gay after watching a gay movie, man?
Crazy, I know. But my favorite movies have been Moonlight and Call Me by Your Name. I think it's just incredible because there's this whole side of humanity that we're now finally getting exposed to that as a hetero white guy, I've never been exposed to. It's good. I need to experience the world from someone else's viewpoint. But just because it's about gay people doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. I was not that crazy about another film that was
that's homophobic.
Rachel Weisz and Rachel McAdams, and I'm a massive Rachel McAdams fan, but it just didn't grab me. I was I was really disappointed. But go watch movies that maybe aren't in your worldview and just see if maybe it expands your world just a little bit and creates a conversation.
I like that a lot. Very nice. Thank you for being on the show, man. Thanks, and any other last parting things? I feel like that was a good closing message. Go watch a good movie and hopefully learn something. So,
as my buddy Todd would say, go watch some movies.
There we go. Awesome. Well, we'll talk to you later, guys. See ya. Boom. There you go, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you made it here to the end, which I know you did because you're listening to my voice right now, I know that you enjoyed this episode. You're probably thinking, hey, I'd love to listen to another episode of the podcast, but where do I start? I have 101 other episodes to choose from. That's pretty nuts. So lucky for you, I have a recommendation for you. Number one, if you enjoyed this conversation, you will love episode 96 with fellow podcaster and digital instrument creator Raul Vega. And by day, Raul actually works for the super famous Hans Zimmer. He's a digital instrument creator, and Hans Zimmer creates scores for tons of films you've definitely heard of, like The Dark Knight, Superman, tons of others. And by night, I guess, he also has a podcast, but our podcasts are extremely different in a good way. So while this podcast is conversational, it's unscripted, it's in person, it's unedited, Raul's podcast called Rose Drive is more like a TV show for your ears. It's like a thrilling drama, and it's really good. And I know that if you love nerding out about all this type of stuff, then you will definitely love that episode. Episode 103 is coming up next week. Coming up next week with Chelsea Zerna. And Chelsea is a digital nomad and women's entrepreneurial coach who coaches on how to use your intuition in your business. And eventually, she would hope that you can coach yourself. It's pretty cool. And I met Chelsea earlier this year, and since then, she's quit her job, put all of her stuff in storage, and she's now living in Bali for a little bit until she moves on to the next place. Pretty exciting stuff. But during our conversation, we talked all about how she embarked on this entrepreneurial journey after years of working in corporate America, her experience in sales and overcoming objections from her family, and so much more. That episode will be coming out next week. I know you guys are going to love it. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to share it with your friends, you know. Your friends are probably talking about podcasts. I see it all the time on Facebook. Hey, what's the best podcast? I'm trying to get into podcasts. If you guys actually like this, then share it with your friends. I would really appreciate that. Word of mouth is the best way that this podcast grows. Also, if you haven't, go over to iTunes, rate it 5 stars, leave me a review, all that good stuff. And if you guys want to follow me, you can follow me if you go to my website, andrewdeitch.com. You can find the links to all my social media handles and accounts and all that good stuff. And also, Instagram is probably the best place to follow me. I'm at AD Podcast. I share a lot of really cool stuff there. And I'm also starting to share some video clips on YouTube. Pretty awesome. So if you're on YouTube, definitely smash that subscribe button or whatever they say. But thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you all next week.
But then he undercuts it. He's like, man, I'm just fucking with you. Like, I just like drugs. like I just like...